Unity and confidence cannot be improvised. They alone can create mutual trust, that feeling of force which gives courage and daring. Courage, that is the temporary domination of will over instinct, brings about victory. Unity alone then produces fighters. But as in everything, there are degrees of unity. Let us see whether modern is in this respect less exacting than ancient combat. These are very cool examples right here. And I sometimes I'm like, hey, should I really read that whole thing? And then I think, oh yeah, I'm going to read the whole thing. But these are just very cool because you're going to get a direct comparison of ancient combat psychologically and modern combat psychologically. And to understand one, it's good to have a frame of reference of the other. Back to the book. In ancient combat, there was danger only at close quarters. If the troops had enough morale to meet the enemy at broadsword's length, there was an engagement. Whoever was that close knew that he would be killed if he turned his back. Because, as we have seen, the victors lost but a few, and the vanquished were exterminated. This simple reasoning held the men and made them fight, if it was but for an instant. So we already talked about that. You know, if you think you're going to die, you're either going to fight or die. You're going to fight. You're going to at least give it a shot. Neglecting the exceptional and very rare circumstances which may bring two forces together, action today is brought on and fought out from afar. Danger begins at great distances, and it is necessary to advance for a long time under fire at each step, in which each step becomes heavier. The vanquished loses prisoners, but often, in dead and wounded, he does not lose more than the victor. So I already talked about that. Ancient combat was fought in groups close together, with a small space in open ground in full view of one another, without the deafening noise of present-day arms. Men in formation marched into action that took place on the spot and did not carry them thousands of feet away from the starting point. The surveillance of the leaders was easy. Individual weakness was immediately checked. General consternation alone caused flight. Today, fighting is done over immense spaces, along thinly drawn out lines, broken every instant by the accidents and the obstacles of the terrain. From the time action begins, as soon as there are rifle shots, the men spread out as skirmishers, or, lost in the inevitable disorder of the rapid march, escape the supervision of their commanding officers. A considerable number conceal themselves. They get away from the engagement and diminish by just so much the material and morale effect and confidence of the brave ones who remain. This can bring about defeat. So modern combat, and again, we're in 1860s. You start charging and the line's broken up and the commanding officer can't. So if you're thinking maybe you want to just live through this one, you might just get down a little trench, get down a little depression, get behind a tree and sit there and wait. But if we're all in line in ancient combat, there was nowhere to go. The commander could see you and your buddies could see you. Back to the book. But let us look at man himself in ancient and modern combat. In ancient combat, this is cool. In ancient combat, I am strong, apt, vigorous, trained, full of calmness, presence of mind. I have good offensive and defensive weapons and trustworthy companions of long standing. They do not let me be overwhelmed without aiding me. I with them, they with me. We are invincible, even invulnerable. We have fought 20 battles, and not one of us remained on the field. It is necessary to support each other in time. Cover and move. We see it clearly. We are quick to replace ourselves, to put a fresh combatant in front of a fatigued adversary. We are the legions, 50,000 who have held out against the furious avalanches of the Cimbri. We have killed 140,000, taken prisoner 60,000, while losing but 200 or 300 of our inexperienced soldiers. So that's sort of a mentality back in the day. And when I say back in the day, I'm talking ancient times, way back in the day. Now here's the modern soldier. Well, at least 1860 soldier. Today, as strong, firm, trained, and courageous as I am, I can never say I shall return. I have no longer to do with men whom I do not fear. I have to do with fate in the form of iron and lead. Death is in the air, invisible and blind, whispering, whistling. As brave, good, trustworthy, and devoted as my companions may be, they do not shield me. Only, and this is abstract and less immediately intelligible to all than the material support of ancient combat, only I imagine that the more numerous who we are who run a dangerous risk, the greater is the chance for each to escape therefrom. I also know that if we have confidence, which none of us should lack in action, we feel stronger, and we are. We begin more resolutely, are ready to keep up the struggle longer, and therefore finish it more quickly. But that is just, I've talked about World War I, how I don't like World War I. I wouldn't want to fight in World War I because it doesn't matter how good of a tactician you are, you're just going to charge and it's going to be horrible. Yeah. Well, if you take that a step further, I guess I would love to be in a situation where I'm fighting with a sword against another guy, because now I could have trained, I could rely on the guys next to me. You have so much control, because even in World War II, any other modern war, like he's just saying, you're not scared of the enemy necessarily. Mm-hmm. You're scared of a random bullet. You're scared of a random piece of shrapnel hitting you. And that could come at any time. Yeah. So it's the psychology is very, very different. Back to the modern soldier here. We finish it. But in order to finish it is necessary to advance, to attack the enemy. And infantrymen or troopers, we are naked against iron, naked against lead, which cannot miss at close range. So, again, you against me with a sword, we got a battle, right? You against me with a gun, if you get your shot off, I'm dead. That's it. I'm naked against that. There's no shield going to stop it. I mean, now we have body armor, but your chances of getting hit in the body armor, although it saved many, many lives, but it's definitely not a guarantee. Let us advance, in any case, resolutely. Our adversary will not stand up to the point-blank range of our rifle, for the attack is never mutual. We are sure of that. We have been told so 1,000 times. We have seen it. But what if matters should change now? Suppose the enemy stands at point-blank range. What of it then? So he's saying, who's going to stand up when you're at point-blank range? How far is that from Roman confidence? In another place, we have shown that in ancient times to retire from action was both difficult and perilous matter for the soldier. Today, the temptation is much stronger, the facility greater, and the peril less. Now, therefore, combat exacts more moral cohesion, greater unity than previously. So that's exactly what I was talking about earlier. If modern combat, you can find a little ditch to hide in, find a little doorway you're going to get into. Especially in this kind of this is a little bit pre-World War I, obviously, but they're still charging, right? They're still getting up and charging. Mm-hmm. So because everyone's all disaggregated across the battlefield, here we go. Back to the book. Supervision becomes more and more difficult. Direction being more distant tends more often to escape from the supreme commanders and the subordinate leaders. The certain and inevitable disorder which a body of troops always presents in action is with moral effect of modern appliances becoming greater every day. So we are getting more and more spread out on the battlefield. In the midst of the confusion and the vacillation of firing lines, men and officers often lose each other. Now, we have some improvements nowadays. We've got radios that are going to travel longer distances. We've got devices that allow people to know where each other are. So there's some things there that we've closed up a little bit. But if you think your radio is always going to work on the battlefield, you're wrong. That's why decentralized command is so important. Back to the book. In troops which do the fighting, the men and officers closest to them, from corporal to battalion commander, have a more independent action than ever. right? We got to have our troops know what's going on. As it is alone, the vigor of that action, more independent than ever, the direction of higher commanders, which leaves the hands of higher commanders available forces, which can be directed at a decisive moment, the action becomes more preponderant than ever. Battles, now more than ever, are battles of men and captains. So this is pure decentralized command. It's pure making sure that everyone knows what the commander's intent is and they can execute out on the battlefield without you having to tell them what to do. They better know what to do on their own. This completes the demonstration of the truth stated before. Combat requires today, in order to give the best results, a moral cohesion, a unity more binding than at any other time. It is as true as it is clear that if one does not wish the bonds to break, one must make them elastic in order to strengthen them. Very, 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 very poignant, that, right? Because the more we try and control things, the less control we're going to have in these modern combat and in business and in life. The more constrictive you are, the more rigid you are, the less control you're going to have. It's just not going to be able to flex and flow with all the craziness that happens out on the battlefield. It's not going to work. Decentralized command all day.